The Arpads or Arpads was the ruling dynasty of the Principality of Hungary in the 9th and 10th centuries and of the Kingdom of Hungary from 1000 to 1301. The dynasty was named after Grand Prince Árpád, who was the head of the Hungarian tribal federation during the conquest of the Carpathian Basin, c. 895. It is also referred to as the Turul dynasty, but really, both the first Grand Prince of the Hungarians and the first King of Hungary were members of the dynasty. 7 members of the dynasty were canonized to be beatified by the Roman Catholic Church. Therefore, since the 13th century the dynasty has often been referred to as the kindred of the Holy Kings. 2 Arpads were canonized by the Eastern Orthodox Church. The dynasty came to end in 1301 with the death of King Andrew III of Hungary, while the last member of the House of Árpád, Andrew's daughter, Blessed Elizabeth of Tost, died in 1336 to 1338. All of the subsequent kings of Hungary were cognatic descendants of the Arpads dynasty. The House of Croy and the Drummond family of Scotland claim to descend from Princes Géza and George, sons of medieval Hungarian kings, Géza II and Andrew I, respectively. 9th and 10th centuries, medieval chroniclers stated that the Arpads' forefather was Ugyek, whose name derived from the ancient Hungarian word for holy. The Gesta Honorum Hungarorum mentioned that the Arpads descended from the gens Turul, and the Gesta Hungarorum recorded that the Arpads' totemic ancestor was her Turul. Medieval chroniclers also referred to a tradition that the Arpads descended from Attila the Hun, the anonymous author of the Gesta Hungarorum. For example, has Arpads say, "The lands stretching between the Danube and the Tisza used to belong to my forefather, the mighty Attila." The first member of the dynasty mentioned by a nearly contemporary written source was Almos. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII recorded in his De Administrando Imperio that Almos was the first Grand Prince of the Federation of the Seven Magyar tribes or its military commander. Around 895, the women and cattle of the Magyar warriors battling in the west were attacked by the Pechenegs, forcing them to leave the territories east of the Carpathian Mountains. The Magyars moved into the Carpathian Basin. Almos's death was probably ritual sacrifice practiced by steppe peoples when the spiritual ruler lost his charisma, and he was followed by his son, Árpád. The Magyar tribes gradually occupied the whole territory of the Carpathian Basin between 895 and 907. Between 899 and 970, the Magyars frequently conducted raids into the territories of present-day Italy, Germany, France and Spain, and into the lands of the Byzantine Empire. Such activities continued westwards until the Battle of Lechfeld, when Otto, king of the Germans, destroyed the troops. The raids against the Byzantine Empire ended in 970. From 917, the Magyars made raids into several territories at the same time, which may have led to the disintegration of the tribal federation. The sources prove the existence of at least 3 and possibly 5 groups of tribes within the tribal federation, and only one of them was led directly by the Arpads. The list of the Grand Princes of the Magyars in the first half of the 10th century is incomplete, which may also prove a lack of central government within the tribal federation. The medieval chronicles mention that Grand Prince Árpád was followed by his son, Zoltán, but contemporary sources only refer to Grand Prince Fajsz. After the defeat at the Battle of Lechfeld, Grand Prince Saxony adopted the policy of isolation from the Western countries, in contrast to his son, Grand Prince Georg, who may have sent envoys to Otto I, Holy Roman Emperor, in 973. Georg was baptized in 972, and although he never became a convinced Christian, the new faith started to spread among the Hungarians during his reign. He managed to expand his rule over the territories west of the Danube and the Garum, but significant parts of the Carpathian Basin still remained under the rule of local tribal leaders. Georg was followed by his son Stephen, who had been a convinced follower of Christianity. Stephen had to face the rebellion of his relative Koppany, who claimed Geza's inheritance based on the Magyar tradition of agnatic seniority. He was able to defeat Koppany with the assistance of the German retinue of his wife Giselle of Bavaria. 11th century. The Grand Prince Stephen was crowned on December 25, 1000, or January 1, 1001, becoming the first king of Hungary and founder of the state. He unified the Carpathian Basin under his rule by 1030, subjugating the territories of the Black Magyars and the domains that had been ruled by independent local chieftains. He introduced the administrative system of the kingdom, based on counties, and founded an ecclesiastic organization with 2 archbishoprics and several bishoprics. Following the death of his son, Emeric, King Stephen I assigned his sister's son, the Venetian Peter Orsola, as his heir, which resulted in a conspiracy led by his cousin Vasul, who had been living imprisoned in Yatra. Vasul was blinded on King Stephen's order and his 3 sons were exiled. When King Stephen I died on August 15, 1038, Peter Orsola ascended to the throne, but he had to struggle with King Stephen's brother-in-law, Samuel Abba. King Peter's rule ended in 1046 when an extensive revolt of the pagan Hungarians broke out and he was captured by them. With the assistance of the pagans, Duke Vasil's son, Andrew, who had been living in exile in the Kievan Rus and had been baptized there, seized power and was crowned. Thus, a member of a collateral branch of the dynasty seized the crown. King Andrew I managed to pacify the pagan rebels and restored the position of Christianity in the kingdom. In 1048, King Andrew invited his younger brother, Beqtla, to the kingdom and conceded 1/3 of the counties of the kingdom in appanage to him. This dynastic division of the kingdom, mentioned as the first one in the Chronicon Pictum, was followed by several similar divisions during the 11th through 13th centuries, when parts of the kingdom were governed by members of the Árpád dynasty. In the 11th century, the counties entrusted to the members of the ruling dynasty did not form a separate province within the kingdom, but they were organized around 2 or 3 centers. The dukes governing the Turšipař regni accepted the supremacy of the kings of Hungary, but some of them rebelled against the king in order to acquire the crown and allied themselves with the rulers of the neighboring countries. King Andrew I was the first king who had his son Solomon crowned during his life in order to ensure his son's succession. However, the principle of agnatic primogeniture was not able to overcome the tradition of seniority, and following King Andrew I, his brother, King Beqtla I acquired the throne despite the claims of the young Solomon. From 1063 until 1080 there were frequent conflicts between King Solomon and his cousins, Georg, Ladislaus and Lampert, who governed the Turšipař regni. Duke Georg rebelled against his cousin in 1074 and was proclaimed king by his partisans in accordance with the principle of seniority. When King Georg I died, his partisans, disregarding his young sons, proclaimed his brother Ladislaus king. King Ladislaus I managed to persuade King Solomon, who had been ruling in some western counties, to abdicate the throne. During his reign, the Kingdom of Hungary strengthened, and Ladislaus I was able to expand his rule over neighboring Croatia, which became a province of Hungary. He entrusted the government of the newly occupied province to his younger nephew, Almos. On 20 August 1083, two members of the dynasty, King Stephen I and his son, Duke Emeric, were canonized in Szekspehérvár upon the initiative of King Ladislaus I. His daughter Irene, the wife of the Byzantine Emperor John II Komnenos, is venerated by the Eastern Orthodox Church. When King Ladislaus I died, his elder nephew Koloman was proclaimed king, but he had to concede the tertiapas regni in appanage to his brother Almos. King Koloman defeated an uprising led by Peter Svacic in 1097. 12th century, King Koloman deprived his brother Almos of his duchy in 1107. He caught his second wife, Euphemia of Kiev, in adultery. She was divorced and sent back to Kiev around 1114. Euphemia bore a son, named Boris in Kiev, but King Koloman refused to accept him as his son. Around 1115, the king had Duke Almos and his son, King Beacutele, blinded in order to ensure the succession of his own son, King Stephen II. King Stephen II did not father any sons, and his sister's son Saul was proclaimed heir to his throne instead of the blind Duke Beacutele. When King Stephen II died on March 1, 1131, his blind cousin managed nevertheless to acquire the throne. King Beacutele II strengthened his rule by defeating King Koloman's alleged son, Boris, who endeavored to deprive him of the throne with foreign military assistance. King Beacutele II occupied some territories in Bosnia, and he conceded the new territory in appanage to his younger son, Ladislaus. Henceforward, members of the Árpád dynasty governed southern or eastern provinces of the kingdom instead of the tertiapas regni. During the reign of King Geacutezade II, the Bishop Otto of Freising recorded that all the Hungarians were so obedient to the monarch that not only irritating him by open opposition but even offending him by concealed whispers would be considered a felony by them. His son, King Stephen III, had to struggle for his throne against his uncles, Kings Ladislaus II and Stephen IV, who rebelled against him with the assistance of the Byzantine Empire. During his reign, the Emperor Manuel I Komnenos occupied the southern provinces of the kingdom on the pretext that the king's brother, Beacutele, lived in his court. As the fiancé of the emperor's only daughter, Despots Alexius was the heir presumptive to the emperor for a short period. Following the death of King Stephen III, King Beacutele III ascended the throne, but he had imprisoned his brother Geacutezade in order to secure his rule. King Beacutele III, who had been educated in the Byzantine Empire, was the first king who used the double cross as the symbol of the Kingdom of Hungary. In 1188, Beacutele occupied Halage, whose prince had been dethroned by his boyars, and granted the principality to his second son Andrew. But his rule became unpopular and the Hungarian troops were expelled from Halage in 1189. On June 27, 1192, the third member of the dynasty, King Ladislaus I, was canonized in Varad. King Beacutele III bequeathed his kingdom intact to his elder son, King Emeric, but the new king had to concede Croatia and Dalmatia in appanage to his brother Andrew, who had rebelled against him. 13th century, King Emeric married Constance of Aragon, from the House of Barcelona, and he may have followed Barcelona's patterns when he chose his coat of arms that would become the Árpáds' familiar badge. His son and successor, King Ladislaus III, died in childhood and was followed by his uncle, King Andrew II. His reign was characterized by permanent internal conflicts. A group of conspirators murdered his queen, Gertrude of Marania. Discontent noblemen obliged him to issue the Golden Bull of 1222 establishing the rights, and he quarreled with his eldest son, Beacutele, who endeavored to take back the royal domains his father had granted to his followers. King Andrew II, who had been Prince of Halych, intervened regularly in the internal struggles of the Principality and made several efforts to ensure the rule of his younger sons in the neighboring country. One of his daughters, Elizabeth, was canonized during his lifetime and thus became the fourth saint of the Arpads. King Andrew's elder sons disowned his posthumous son, Stephen, who would be educated in Ferrara. Members of the family reigned occasionally in the Principality of Halych and in the Duchy of Styria. King Beacutele IV restored the royal power, but his kingdom became devastated during the Mongol invasion. Following the withdrawal of the Mongol troops, several fortresses were built or strengthened on his order. He also granted town privileges to several settlements in his kingdom, e.g. Buda, Nagyszombat, Selmecbania and Pest received the privileges from him. King Beacutele IV managed to occupy the Duchy of Styria for a short period, but later he had to abandon it in favor of King Ottokar II of Bohemia. During his last years, he was struggling with his son, Stephen, who was crowned during his lifetime and obliged his father to concede the eastern parts of the kingdom to him. Two of his daughters, Margaret and Kinga, were canonized and a third daughter of his, Yolanda, was beatified. His fourth daughter, Constance, was also venerated in Lviv. When King Stephen V ascended the throne, many of his father's followers left for Bohemia. They returned during the reign of his son, King Ladislaus IV the Cuman, whose reign was characterized by internal conflicts among the members of different aristocratic groups. King Ladislaus IV, whose mother was of Cuman origin, preferred the companion of the nomadic and semi-pagan Cumans. Therefore, he was excommunicated several times, but he was murdered by Cuman assassins. The disintegration of the kingdom started during his reign when several aristocrats endeavored to acquire possessions on the account of the royal domains. When King Ladislaus IV died, most of his contemporaries thought that the dynasty of the Arpads had come to an end, because the only patrilineal descendant of the family, Andrew, was the son of Duke Stephen, the posthumous son of King Andrew II, who had been disowned by his brothers. Nevertheless, Duke Andrew, the Venetian, was crowned with the Holy Crown of Hungary, and most of the barons accepted his rule. During his reign, King Andrew III had to struggle with the powerful barons. The male line of the Arpads ended with his death. One of his contemporaries mentioned him as the last golden twig. His daughter, Elizabeth, the last member of the family, died on May 6, 1338. She is venerated by the Roman Catholic Church. Following the death of King Andrew III, several claimants started to struggle for the throne. Finally, King Charles I managed to strengthen his position around 1310. Henceforward, all the kings of Hungary were matrilineal or cognate descendants of the Arpads. Although the agnatic Arpads have died out, their cognatic descendants live everywhere in the aristocratic families of Europe. Dynasty tree. Saints. The following members of the dynasty were canonized: St. Stephen, canonized in 1083. Saint Emeric, canonized in 1083. St. Ladislaus, canonized in 1192. Saint Elizabeth, canonized in 1235. St. Margaret, canonized in 1943. St. Kinga canonized in 1999. Saint Irene canonized by the Eastern Orthodox Church. Citations